I thank you for being here today. The adoption of the pretext stop policy has created a number of questions and concerns about what is it that I'm asking that the department has been asked to do in regards to what is one of the most important functions we have, which is going out and policing the streets of the city and being proactive and using what tools we have available to improve the quality of life, but also reduce violence and improve the safety of our communities. So I appreciate that as watch commanders, you hear and you're on the front lines of that. And so there's probably some questions that you're hearing that I may not. So this is an opportunity for us to sit down, listen to what question or concern you're hearing, try to explain in the best possible term what it is I expect and what the policy requires and what is needed as we go out and do our work each day.
Officers are concerned that this policy will increase personnel complaints since it's already circulating in social media.
I would hope that it would not, but it could. People that are dissatisfied with a stop by a police officer may look at this recent policy and how it's been described in some circles and allege that there was a violation. Now, we take public complaints from all sources. What I have instructed our captains and our supervisors to do, and people within, such as your sergeants or yours that come upon a scene of an allegation of misconduct that this was a pretext stop and a violation of policy, is to take that initial intake. Look, review the body worn. Review the actions of the officers. You have 14 days to complete that initial assessment. And if the officer's actions were appropriate, which I suspect the vast majority of the time they will be, is that you work with your captain to adjudicate that complaint directly. Unfound it, the actions do not or supported by the policy and are allowed, and move forward. If there are instances in which the officer's actions were, they stopped and there was something that they did fall short, that we sit down, talk with the officers, provide education, awareness, and understanding, and we move forward. In that complaint, it is a public complaint. Its actions could have been different. It's not going to be a disciplinary matter. I expect for us to go out and orient our workforce as to what the guidelines of this policy and what the expectations are.
Chief, another question officers have been asking in roll call is in regards to traffic stops and pedestrian stops, are they going to be able to ask questions such as, do you have any wants and warrants? Are you on parole, probation? Are they going to be able to conduct warrant checks on the individuals they're conducting the traffic stop or pedestrian stop on?
Yeah, absolutely. This policy does not change anything in regards to the investigative questions that an officer is expected to ask and explore. You're conducting, what I'm asking for is the nature of the stop is your first question, are you on probation or parole? And we know that should not be the case. But over the course of an investigative stop, a pretext or otherwise, the officer's ability to ask a person for their identification, where they're coming from, where they're going, whether or not they have any wants or warrants, or conducting a want or warrant check, is all within their rights and authorities as a police officer, and I need and ask that they continue to do those things.
Chief, so a question the officers may have is, can you please explain the difference between a pretextual stop and doing a wall stop, and if articulation is still required?
Okay, so actually a pretext stop, which sometimes is called a wall stop, is actually the same thing. A wall stop is historically been an investigative stop under the pretext of a minor traffic violation or equipment violation to conduct an independent investigation, to ask a person's name, to identify who they are, occupants of a vehicle. The wall reference allows that information can be passed to an investigator and used for their investigative purpose. This policy does not require you, and in fact I do not want you, to tell the motorist that you're stopping them because you've been, as an officer, been asked to conduct a wall stop and identify the occupants of the vehicle. We are asking the officer that if they stop an individual for a California stop or a minor equipment violation and it's a wall stop, to explain the purpose of the stop limited to the fact of the underlying pretext, the matter of an equipment violation or a minor traffic violation. But let's be clear, do not compromise an investigation by telling them that the real reason they're stopping them is because they're subject of a murder investigation and you've been asked by SIS or someone else to conduct a wall stop.
Chief, officers are concerned that this policy will have an effect on their safety and create an overall apprehension on conducting pedestrian stops and traffic stops, and maybe overall some confusion. Your thoughts, sir? So
I think the key on this policy is that it reflects good policing because we simply are articulating the reason why we're stopping someone. The same goes for this should not interfere with officer safety. The basis of determining whether or not to conduct a search, a pat-down search for weapons, for instance, is not impacted. There's nothing in this policy that precludes that or limits it or stops it. We do expect that if you decide to conduct a pat-down search, that you have some articulable basis for it. But that's the current policy. It's always been that. That's been the training and expectation. members of the public believe that they're being stopped and being asked to get out of a vehicle just because of their skin color or because of the time of day. And we know that that's not the case. But I do also support that officers will ask people to get out of a vehicle for purposes of their safety, and that they'll articulate that basis on their body worn. Now, finally, if a practice of an officer is that everyone that they stop, everyone gets out of the car, this is not, that has never been the policy of this organization, nor its training. And what I expect to have happen is for officers to realize that they need to make individual actions based on their individual ability to articulate the basis for why they're doing. So, tell your story, articulate the basis for why you're doing it, and you're going to be fine.
And upon completion of the traffic stop or pedestrian stop, sir, do you recommend, or is it going to be a requirement to document it on their EDFAR?
Yes, so I will say that, this goes back a bit of time, but I used to use the backside of the goldenrod on a traffic citation to write down statements of the motorists, refresh my memory later if I had to go to court about why I did what I did. Thankfully today you got a body-worn camera. You just simply talk to the camera. This is, describe what you did, the basis for it. It doesn't have to be formal. It doesn't need to be, the best King's English, so to speak. But that articulation for the actions you took and why you took them should be short, brief, to the point, and just move on. Later, should you have to, your actions be challenged, you've got a supervisor, you've got your own story, you've got your own account, be able to review that body worn, and it'll demonstrate, again, your side of the story. And I think that that's going to serve you well, and it's going to serve the department well.
This is a newer policy. Will the department allow for a grace period if an officer does not inadvertently provide articulation before, during, or after the stop?
Yeah.
Will they be subject to a personnel complaint?
So internally, they're not subject to an internal complaint at this current time. And I don't know that there's not a grace period per se, because I don't see this as a gotcha. My commitment to you, as I've spoken with captains, is this is not a policy that internally we're looking to go find somebody fall short of. We want people to be able to understand this is what we're asking you to do. If they fall short of that standard, that we sit down, talk with them, make sure that they understand what actions they're supposed to take. That may be an informal counseling session. It may be a meeting with the advisor that escalates to a comment card if there's repeated failures. But I don't want to establish a 90-day grace period, because I think that's artificial, and I don't think it's fair to the officers. There may be a time where an officer doesn't conduct a stop for the next 2 or 3 or 4 months that comes into question, and the first time they do, or the first time it's challenged, is the first time they've had an opportunity to know, well, maybe all those earlier stops I wasn't doing exactly what I should have been doing. Period. Because my expectation is that over the period of weeks and months ahead, as officers go out and do their work, and I need them to do their work every day and being proactive and going out and conducting vehicle stops, conducting pedestrian stops based on, at times, pretexts, because they have a little bit of information, additional information that this person may be involved in some more serious crime, or investigative stops based on reasonable suspicion. I want them to go out and do that work. I need them. We need them to do this work. This policy, while some have said it's going to stop that, I don't believe so. I think that this policy protects that if an officer does what we need to do best in this work, which is articulate why we're doing what we're doing.
Chief, the officers are asking if they are assigned to an A car, do both officers have to articulate, or just one of the officers?
No, we need one of the 2 officers. There's a contact cover concept in this organization. You fill out the FDRs. It represents both officers' actions. You fill out the articulation on one of the 2 officers' body worn is sufficient. This work as a team. There's no reason to just repeat the same thing that you've said.
All right, Chief, I have the next question. Officer would like to know, what happens if an officer mistakenly articulates their reasoning for a pretext stop?
The point here, people are going to make mistakes. People are going to think they had one thing and it turned out to be another. What's important is that they just act in good faith. If they stop somebody and they, later we ask them to review their body worn, and they, the moment that they made some expression it wasn't as complete or accurate, then just go back and correct the record. You can't erase body worn video, but you can certainly add to that record of a clarification, or I know I said this, but I'm looking back and reflecting on this, and here's something else that I didn't have time or didn't occur to me to say. I do not expect, these are spontaneous, informal, unplanned actions. I need that work to continue. We want that work to continue. But do not rehearse this. Do not go back and worry and contemplate over this. Do your best. And the effort here is to show our work and to show why we're doing what we're doing. And I think that the framework which we have here will allow that to be done in a very in a manner that will be effective.
How long does the officer have to articulate themselves on the body-worn video for them to be considered in policy or out of policy?
So let's just take an example. You're conducting, a couple officers are working an A car on a Watch 3 and a vehicle with no front plate drives by them in an opposite direction in a residential area. And the vehicle is a four-door, perhaps foreign-made vehicle, and it matches the color of a car that was seen the night before, reported a couple days ago, conducting follow-home robberies or burglaries. Now, there's not a whole lot of information there, probably not enough information to form an independent reasonable suspicion for a stop for a robbery investigation, but you have no front plate. So you can do a pretext stop on that to see if there's more information that can be developed during the course of that stop that might identify these guys as follow-off bandits. What I'm expecting to do is the officer would make a U-turn so he can catch up with the vehicle and conduct a stop. And it's a pretext stop for no front plate. And when you walk up on the car, and as you make contact with the motorist, and you start making an investigative inquiry for license and registration, and your eyeballs and your head's on a swivel, and you're looking, and you're getting a feedback on the plate and so forth, are you building any investigative clues or leads that this vehicle may be tied into that follow-home bandit? How do you articulate that? When that car goes by, why are you going to stop that car? Just briefly. If you're going to stop that car because you think there's a car, similar car description, make and model, color that was involved in some follow-home robberies, and you want to see if they have any involvement with that, boom, you're done. Conduct it. And then, again, you're talking with your partner, communicating with who's going to be contact cover. You've worked that out in advance, but you're going to run the plate. You're going to choose a place in which to conduct that stop. Talk. Use your words. All you're demonstrating is that if some later complain against you that you stopped that car because there was two male Hispanics that were in the car, and it was you did that because of their race. When a supervisor watches that, they can see, no, you did that because you tied it into a more serious crime other than a front plate.
Chief, follow up to that. Do we have a list of code violations that are not allowed for pretextual stops, even with articulation, or even for strictly traffic safety violations?
So let me say that absolutely every vehicle code violation is open game for a pretext stop, period. Those are all matters that are all open if you're using it for a pretext. What we are saying, though, is if you're not using it as a pretext, you have no added information, then the fact that somebody's got rearview mirror ornament that's partially blocking their windshield, absent any other information, can the officer describe the serious public safety matter that represents? I'm not aware of one. On tinted windows, I am also aware that the vehicle code for bald tires, for required lighting, those do have serious public safety concerns. When, in my view, I can articulate that a person driving at night without lights on poses a serious hazard to pedestrians as well as to the motorists themselves. If they choose to stop just for that violation, under no pretext, not investigating anything else, just that, I do expect that they're going to conduct vehicle traffic enforcement for required lighting. That's the basis of why you're stopping them. If they say, well, no, I'm just here to, looking for something else, well, what's the added information that you would use, and what are you relying on? I've not given you a list, or we've not decided on a list, that these are prohibited from minor enforcement, but I would ask you, do you really intend to stop and take enforcement action? If you do, because there's a serious public hazard, make that stop all day long. Just tell your body-worn video what it is about that minor equipment violation that ties into what is related to a safety concern. What this policy says is, first of all, and this is not the officer's fault, all those types of stops previously, we didn't know if the underlying basis was for pretext or was actually for the window obscurement. So now the new FDRs will allow you to identify that, no, this was a pretext. And on your body worn, you put that added information about why they were stopped. We want them to go out and use that discretion wisely. This policy protects them and allows them to use that discretion wisely as long as they articulate the basis.
Chief, how will these stops be reviewed and inspected, and who's going to make the final determination on whether or not the articulation satisfies the requirement for it to be deemed in policy?
Yeah. So I expect currently that body-worn video or the circumstances of the stop, there's no identified inspection process. We haven't said that starting June 1st that we're going to conduct 5 of these inspections a week or any type of programmed review. So the vast majority of times I expect will be, should there be a public complaint? Or should there be a concern identified that says, well, we need to look and make sure that we're abiding by this standard. Who the reviewers are is the same thing what happens today when there's an allegation of misconduct, right? It'll be a supervisor who takes the intake, a watch commander or lieutenant that evaluates it, gives feedback to the area captain. The area and patrol captain will make a letter transmittal that would say if this is a complaint, should have, and did not, whether it meets the standard. That's then reviewed by the Bureau and ultimately by Internal Affairs. If it's sustained, it comes before me, and the circumstances are described to me, and whether or not I feel that that the actions of the officers met the standard or fell short. But again, let me be clear. On a public complaint today and for the foreseeable future, I expect us to go out and model this behavior, for us to go out and do our best in meeting the articulations that I'm asking for. And a public complaint that says that the officer didn't, I expect that the area will handle this as a training matter, period. And I expect people, our people, to involve themselves with understanding what this policy is, what its requirements are, and to do their best. And as they do that, I'm here to protect them from somebody overly interpreting this and being overly aggressive and having them meet a quote-unquote standard that may not be fair or consistent across this organization. And I'm trying, and will work and continue to work to ensure that we, as we move through the orienting ourselves and acquainting ourselves with what its requirements are, that anyone using the complaint system as a hatchet or a hammer, that we correct that misuse, because that's not what this is meant to do.